After reading numerous parenting books, watching hours of parenting videos here on YouTube, and generally just thinking about the subject for a great deal of time, I've come to the conclusion that most parents do not have an overall philosophy when raising their kids. Most parents do what I call parenting the problem, not the child. Before I get into this topic, I want to ask that if you haven't already, please subscribe. I'm hoping to get a publisher interested in my book, and you subscribing would be a big help in achieving that goal. Now, let's talk about parenting the problem, not the child. Over the last few decades, people have become obsessed with the concept of tips, tricks, and hacks. Have you ever heard of the 5 C's of parenting, the 777 plan, the 3 F's approach? What about the 10 commandments of parenting, or the 3 things you need to do every day to raise a strong child? These things go on and on forever. Tips, tricks, and hacks. Yes, many of these can be very helpful in providing some guidance for a particular parenting situation you find yourself in. But this is not a way to raise your child. You need a philosophy that guides every decision you make to help your child prepare them for life as an adult. If your parenting approach is to say 3 positive things to your child every day, or just wait for something bad to happen and then deal with it, you're not really parenting. That's not good parenting. That's parenting the problem. Study after study finds that kids prefer structure in their life. They prefer a recognizable and established system. It gives them comfort. It gives them a base, a solid foundation in everything they do in their daily life. Kids like structure. Parenting the problem provides no structure. It's haphazard. There's no consistency to it. There's not a framework to fall back on when guiding your child through their childhood years. For me, over the last several months, reading, watching, and thinking about best practices for raising a child, all I've seen, the vast majority of what I've seen, is tips, tricks, and hacks. Many so-called parenting experts do talk about a system, but generally there's no substance to it. They're really just talking about dealing with issues as they arise, or trying to establish the habit of doing or saying a few things on a daily basis, as if that's a plan, a practice, or a philosophy for raising children. If you already have kids, what's your approach to parenting? You have a parental philosophy that guides your parenting decisions. As a stay-at-home dad, I committed myself to trying my best to figure out what was in my son's best interests when trying to determine a parenting approach. Sure, I use tips, tricks, and hacks often, but that's reactive parenting, not proactive parenting. The real question for me was, am I going to be a disciplinarian, authoritative? Maybe use the gentle parenting approach, more permissive, or helicopter parenting versus uninvolved, hands-off parenting. The problem with all those approaches are that many of them are completely diametrically opposed to the other. Helicopter parenting versus uninvolved, authoritative versus gentle parenting. How can these be legitimate choices when they're often in direct conflict with each other? What about parents that have more than one child? How are you going to manage a gentle parenting, hands-off approach with your son when your daughter seems to respond much better to an authoritative approach? Think about it. When I started to really think about what parenting philosophy I wanted to use, I started at the end. I pictured my son as a 35-year-old. I didn't care where he had gone to college or even if he had gone to college. I didn't care how much money he was earning. I didn't care what job he was doing. I did care that he had a job. What I focused on was what characteristics I believed he should possess so that he could navigate life as an adult and achieve the goals in life that he set for himself. Now, let me step to the side for a second here. I believe wholeheartedly that no one should be judged a success or a failure until they're 35 years old. I've known many seemingly successful young adults in their 20s that later turned out to be complete failures. On the flip side, I've known even more 20-somethings that looked like a complete disaster, but by their mid-30s, they had turned their lives around, gotten on track, and were living a good life, a happy life, one that had meaning for them. Please do not too quickly judge your kids or others until they're in their mid-30s. Oh, and also, please don't tell me I shouldn't judge. We all judge. It's human nature. Those of us that are immature share those judgments out loud. Those of us with some tact and decency, we keep those judgments to ourselves. But in the end of the day, we all judge. Now, back to my future 35-year-old son. Who and what was I hoping he would be? What I finally settled on was that I hoped my son would be independent, able to rely on himself for the most part in life. I hoped he would possess the confidence to challenge himself with new things, the confidence to put himself out there to live his best life. And I hoped he would understand how to make good decisions so that the outcomes he was looking for were more likely to be achieved because he knew how to pick a path to get to a particular outcome, that he was able to recognize if that path was going to get him there, and perhaps most importantly, realize when he was deviating from the path, what he needed to do was make new decisions to realize those dreams. In short, I wanted to raise an independent, confident, good decision maker. And my wife and I, we did. If my book ever gets published, these videos, as well as my book, will help you raise an ICD adult. Now, when I finally realized what I was hoping to help him become, that's when things got difficult. How do you start out with a lump of clay, a baby, and help shape it into the form you think is in your child's best interest? And then one day it hit me. How do I achieve the goal of raising an ICD adult? My epiphany? You challenge the child long before they're ever an adult to live at the boundaries of their abilities. As I've discussed in great detail in my video, The Boundaries of Their Abilities, that's the real success point. If you haven't already watched that video, please do. Now, there are all kinds of things to think about and do to challenge your child to live at the boundaries of their abilities. First and foremost, you have to recognize their uniqueness. To me, that meant never comparing my son to other children. Many things that challenged my son were frankly impossible for most other kids his age. How many 15-year-olds do you know could ride by themselves over 350 miles on a mountain bike in just over 3 days, 73 hours, with over 50,000 feet of climbing across the North Georgia mountains? Google TNGA, 15-year-old. Check it out. I put a link below. Very few 15-year-olds could take on that challenge and complete it. Now, there were plenty of things my son was incapable of that other kids could easily accomplish. The point is that your child is one of a kind. Embrace that and challenge them in a manner that encourages them to find their boundaries and push up against them in an effort to live their best life. That's the process my wife and I went through to figure out how we wanted to raise our son. I started by thinking about and picturing the 35-year-old adult I hoped my son would become. I came to the conclusion that being independent, having confidence, and lastly, possessing good decision-making skills were the ideal characteristics for him to have to live his best life. A life of meaning, of joy, of bringing passion to the things he did in his life, every day if possible. And finally, I came up with the concept of living at the boundaries of his abilities as a roadmap to get to that point, to lead that life to be an ICD adult. Ultimately, the concept of living life at the boundaries of your abilities is the predominant aspect of my parenting philosophy. That parenting concept can be applied from the very beginning of your child's life, starting the day they come home from the hospital and continuing until they leave your house. Everything I did with my son was first put through the lens of developing him to be an ICD adult, learning to live at the boundaries of his abilities. My wife and I did not parent the problem. We consciously and purposely parented our son with that parenting philosophy guiding all of our decisions, ICD. Now let me jump back to the beginning of this video. Far too many parents today don't use a structured, organized, well thought out system, philosophy when raising their children. They parent the problem, not the child. If as a parent you want to implement a system to help your child realize and live their best life, you have to look far into the future and imagine what you hope your child will become and figure out a way to help your child get there. I believe every adult benefits, lives their best life if they possess independence, confidence, and good decision-making skills. Now, every one of those adults is different. They're unique. But I believe having those core skills will lead them to their best life. To be a good parent, in my opinion, is to have a plan to raise your kids to live their best life. What's your plan? If it's just relying on tips, tricks, and hacks to get you through, that's not a plan. Figure out a plan for your child. Obviously, I recommend the ICD parenting approach, but you've got to come up with something for the sake of your child. Look around at the adults in your life. Can you tell the ones whose parents didn't have a plan? The ones suffering from anxiety and depression, drug and alcohol abuse, the many mental health issues so many people struggle with today. Those adults weren't properly prepared for the rigors of living a healthy adult life. Don't parent the problem, parent the child. You will use tips, tricks, and hacks to help you with the many issues you'll face as a parent. But those can't be the basis for your parental philosophy, because they're not a philosophy. Figure out a system to help guide you with parenting your child from point A, baby, to point B, healthy, happy, well-adjusted adult living their best life. Raising an independent, confident, good decision maker is a process. It's a long process. It lasts for 18 years. But if you do it right, your child will reap the benefits for a lifetime. Thanks for listening.